Tokelau, literally the worst country in all of Rise of Nations. And today, I'm gonna try and see if I can make it a superpower. And this was not easy to do. I loaded in and instantly spammed out all of my manpower on infantry before making an electronic factory. Usually, I use the ignore safety regulations and improve infrastructure policies, but that is only when I need to make 5 factories or more. And since I am a one city country, I need only to make an electronic factory to start off my eco, since my spending laws are extremely cheap. Once I get more treasury, that's when I will build the rest of my factories. I then went right into buying the resources I needed, which was 3 gold and 3 copper. I maxed out military, government, education, and research spending, and dropped my taxes to the minimum. Always go minimum taxes if your population is under like 5 million. You're barely making anything from taxes anyway, so it's better to rely on trade for a solid income. Going minimum also boosts your stability extremely quickly. I jumped right into the research tech and right clicked twice to auto research the rest of it. As Tokelau, one good thing is that if you max out anti-corruption and go for underground labs, you don't get any corruption at all. Underground labs gives a 40% research boost, which helps you get quantum much quicker. I sent my infantry into the nearby micronations, and early on into the game, I picked mass attack. This was probably not the best move. Even though you get way more infantry, they're way weaker compared to static lines, and you'll see what I mean later on. I checked the leader pool and got super lucky with a head of research that gave me a plus 15% boost. On top of that, I had underground labs and the advanced research policy, so altogether I was on a 89% boost, and that's without any of the research tech. I flanked my troops and declared on the country next to me. Since I made all of these infantry before switching to mass attack, they started off with normal training, so I was able to win pretty easily. After that, I started justifying on the micronations around me. I pieced out Tuvalu and then declared on the country next to me. I flanked again and sent in another 10k infantry that I made. This was the first game where I realized that mass attack infantry actually costs less manpower. But I was still waiting until I had 10k manpower to make troops, and I didn't even realize until I actually looked through mass attack and its bonuses. After that, I went for American Samoa, and this is where everything fell apart. From this point on, they became my biggest op. This is exactly why you should never pick mass attack while playing as Tokelau. Sure, it gives you more infantry early on, but once your starting troops are gone, you're stuck with garbage troops. I legit had more soldiers than I had population, and I was still getting absolutely destroyed by 20,000 AI infantry. I was losing to an AI, one city, island nation, so I stopped going for them and went to New Zealand as it's easier to take over than these Samoans. I spammed over 180,000 troops when I only had 85,000 population and went for New Zealand. The good thing about taking them over is that they have a square city, which will be extremely useful for taking over Australia. And once you take over the Australians, that's when you expand into a decent country with over 50 million population. And then that's when you go into proper player wars and become a superpower. Also, make sure to mount and specialize your infantry while taking over New Zealand so they can move around much easier. And avoid taking over the square city because you can force peace New Zealand without it and not waste a bunch of troops trying to take it over for no reason. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I already got Quantum mid 2021 and didn't even notice because you would never get it that early on. I then thought about going to tax tech, but decided that going infantry tech would be a better choice now since I was not going to be making anything from taxes anyways, and I also wanted to take over the American Samoa with infantry tech because they killed over 100,000 of my soldiers, and I'm not going to let that slide. I pieced New Zealand and sent the infantry that took them over right into American Samoa to get my revenge. I flanked over 70,000 infantry with tech and destroyed them. I also went for other micronations, but they're irrelevant, so I'm gonna skip over that. After New Zealand cored down, I made a decent amount of tanks and made sure to air specialize them since Australia's whole central part is arid, and if I didn't air spec them, I would get a bunch of attrition, and I also did make some more tanks to help out, but 1.2k tanks were able to take over most of Australia. India was AI, so I decided that going for them and getting a bunch of population would help me out to become a superpower and put me in a good position to fight players like Indonesia and Vietnam, or even China. I auto-captured Australia and waited for it to core down, since I needed a bunch more than 1.2k tanks to take over India. I made over 4,000 tanks to go for India, and at first I sat in the tanks that I used to take over Australia. The plan was to use them to fight off India's troops and then wait for the rest of my tanks to arrive before auto-capturing the country. But then Indonesia showed up and started pushing into India too. So I realized that I couldn't really wait anymore. If I waited for all my tanks to get there, Indonesia might have taken over most of India by the time that I was ready. So instead, I let tanks that I already had in India to reinforce, and once I cleared India's troops, I just auto-captured with what I had. I figured that that was way better than risking the entire country getting taken over by Indonesia before I could even finish my push. That ended up working way better than I expected. After I auto-captured India, the rest of my tanks finally got there, so I just moved them in and finished taking over the whole country. I already had most of the north, which gave me a ton of population and land, so it was perfect. Then I declared on Pakistan. They've got a bunch of population too, and if I'm trying to turn Tokelau into a superpower, I can't just stop as India. Pakistan was right there, so I just kept going and pushed straight in while my army was still ready. Indonesia didn't actually take that much of India either. They only managed to get the southern part, so I wasn't really worried about it. I had the important parts already, and I knew that I could take the rest of it if I needed to later. I was already thinking about going for Indonesia and his ally Vietnam next, and I didn't want them getting any stronger while I was building up, and they were already close enough to me that I could just keep going into them if I wanted to. I had enough troops and a decent eco to handle it, so I was already pretty much set on that being my next move. Since I was planning on going for Indonesia next, I switched over to static lines. Mass attack just wasn't going to work anymore. I needed stronger units if I was going to take down both Indonesia and Vietnam. At that point, I was looking for a large amount of troops. I needed stronger, better troops so I wouldn't just get a bunch of losses. I also didn't attack right away and waited for India and Pakistan to fully core down. That way, I started getting more tax income, which was going to help out my eco a lot. Also, once they were cored down, I'd have way more land to use, so if the original attack didn't work out, I could just spam more troops right into Indonesia without worrying about manpower. I ended up going into debt because my spending laws got way more expensive after all that new population from India and Pakistan. I wasn't making enough money to keep all of the spendings, so I had to drop both my research and education spending just to stay out of debt. Kind of annoying, but there wasn't really a choice. Then Indonesia just released all and left the game, so that problem solved itself. I decided to move on to Vietnam next and take them over, since they were still in the game and had some decent land. After that, the plan was to go for China, which would have been the final step to get me into first place in the world rankings instead of just being a regular superpower. But yeah, that didn't go how I thought it would. I declared on Vietnam with over 8,000 tanks, some attacking through the land and the rest attacking through the water. I was able to make a good amount of progress in taking them over, but then they allied China and added them to the war. I wanted to take over Vietnam before going to China so I could be more prepared, but China decided to attack me and help out Vietnam. His infantry was much better than my tanks, which made sense since I didn't have max tank tech and he definitely had max anti-tech, so that made it much harder for me to push into him. I made more tanks in India to try and go around the mountainous parts and get into his mainland, but that didn't work out. He had a crazy defense. I wasn't going to let anything go into his mainland, so I decided to make infantry to go around and kill his troops. My infantry was much better than his, but he had much more troops than me, so even if mine were able to beat his, he was just able to spam more without a problem. So I made even more tanks to go through the water and try and land in China, which I thought would work. But he noticed the tanks and set his attackers to kill them. I split them and auto-captured trying to move them away from his attackers, but they landed and weren't able to do any damage because of how many troops were lost in the water. He also made infantry in the parts that my tanks landed in and easily killed them. China wasn't going to be easy to take down. No matter how many attacks I made, he was able to defend or push back. I kept trying to push into China and go through any land of his, but he had enough and went into India. I had a bunch of war exhaust and got deserters, so I had negative manpower. I wasn't able to defend against any of his attacks in India. I made a huge navy so I could try and land on his capital with an aircraft carrier, a bunch of destroyers, battleships, and submarines. But then the worst thing happened. I got oil shortage the same time that I got into debt, so all my 9,000 tanks started to die and I couldn't do anything about it. I disbanded all my tanks to get out of a deficit, but I was only making 1.5 million. I already had a bunch of troops training in Australia, preparing to go for China, so I sent them in the water with my navy, and my aircraft carrier also finally finished building, so I sent them all up into China, and I made sure to get navy tech just in case he makes a navy to fight mine. I got out of debt and bought oil so my ships would work better, and made some tanks in Pakistan to retake India. All of China's troops that were used to take over India died, so I was able to retake it pretty easily. And I swear, I went through the recording and everything multiple times. My aircraft carrier straight up died or something. I never disbanded it or anything, it just disappeared. I don't know how this happened. So I had to waste more money and time making another aircraft carrier. China made more troops and sent them into India, but I was not gonna let him take it over again. So I made a bunch of tanks to rush his infantry, and I didn't care if they died. Those troops weren't gonna do any damage to my Indian lands. Anyways, after all that time, the aircraft carrier finally finished, and of course China had a navy, which destroyed mine. I had navy tech, a navy leader, literally everything, but somehow this guy's navy still beat mine. I split up all my infantry and started auto-capturing, but this once again didn't do anything to his fortress of a country. So I decided, screw it, and went mass attack this fam like crazy. And honestly, gave up and went AFK. So this is why I hate Tokelau, and I am never gonna play another micronation again unless this video gets like 5,000 views. Thank you for watching, and watch these two videos next.